Chair down. It's fine with me. I'll be a little bubble, but it's totally fine.
No, it's fine.
Okay, just so you will be as well.
They can expand the bubble.
What'd you say?
They can expand the bubble if they
Yeah,
want,
but it
if
won't
they want to see me.
The bubble. All right, well, it's 6 o'clock here in New York State, so let's get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the University of Rochester's Eastman School of Music here at Howard Hanson Hall. I want to thank all of you for joining us here live tonight, and thank all of you who are joining us at home on Zoom. It's good to have you visiting with us again. I'm Galen McCormick, and I'm the program manager for Eastman Performing Arts Medicine, and that's a collaboration between the Eastman School and the University of Rochester Medical Center. I am so excited about this series. This is our 4th presentation in the series. And this month we're talking about performance anxiety, which I feel like we just don't talk about enough. So I'm really thrilled to tell you that tonight we have Anne McCulloch with us, and she's a recent graduate of the Simon School. She did her master's in medical management, and it was focused on performance anxiety. And she'll be talking about how that fits in. And Justin McCulloch, who's a professional double bass player and who is about to become, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Justin McCulloch, because he's completed his Doctor of Musical Arts here at the Eastman School, and congratulations, that is an incredible achievement. So I will be monitoring the Q&A tonight for those of you who are on Zoom, and of course the rest of us that are here live, you'll feel free to raise your hand at the end if you have questions for Justin and Anne. So without any further ado, if you're ready, let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak to you about peak performance and managing performance anxiety. I'll tell a little story about myself. About 16 years ago, I completed my master's and was actively taking auditions and performing, and I'd probably taken at that time a little over 25 to almost 30 professional auditions. And I was preparing for an audition with the National Symphony Orchestra, and something I felt had a decent shot at. I had gone through all the repertoire and literature and been preparing actually probably for months at this time. And I remember getting there, feeling comfortable, warming up and getting out on stage and starting the first excerpt and feeling like I'd really started well and getting partially through that first excerpt. And I made just a little bobble, I think it's with my bow. And at that moment that I made that just little slight mistake, I felt my heart rate shoot through the roof, just welled right up into my throat. And I could barely breathe at that moment. And my hands started shaking and everything sweating, almost to the point where I could barely hear anything. And of course, that freaked me out and totally bombed the rest of the audition. And this had been something that hadn't occurred regularly, but when it occurred, it hit me really hard. And it freaked me out to here I am in this major audition, now possibly an opportunity to set myself for life in this career, and I'm crashing and burning. And it threw me for a loop. It sent me into a depression. And when I took other auditions, things like that kind of kept occurring. I would either tighten up, or I would have some shakes, or a little bit of trouble breathing. Seriously, like these things kept happening, and they kept getting worse and worse as I went along. And it actually, as I point out with this, as I kept going through this, I kept asking myself, what's wrong with me? What's going on? Why do I keep screwing up? Why am I a failure? Why am I, messing up this stuff? I know I can play better than this. I know I can perform at a higher level than this. And why am I doing this? What's wrong with me? And that really wasn't the right question at the time. But what it was doing is it was sending me into a depression. It was making things worse. And it's something that I had to get to a point where I was either going to quit music completely because I couldn't continue with the pain of dealing with this performance and then having these episodes and just sending me these terrible feelings and just causing all this anxiety and pain in me. But it was also something that I couldn't give up because I'd been doing music for my entire life. I was probably 25 at the time. And it was something I just felt passionate about, and it was part of me, and it was my life I'd done for so long. And to even think of quitting even made my depression worse too. So at that point, I stepped away from taking auditions, and I started making a progress of learning what is going on in my mind. And one of the things I found out is I was stimulating basically the ancient part of my brain, what they call this part called the amygdala. And what happens is this is what we have in a normal response, what we call the fight or flight or freeze syndrome. So if there's a stimulus, say, if you're one of the ancient cavemen or something, and you see a tiger suddenly come near you, that stimulus of seeing that tiger is going to send that ancient brain into, fight mode or runaway mode or freeze or anything like that. And it's a normal response, and we all have this, and it's a very healthy response, actually. It's something that is, bred into us. But what can happen is we can amplify it, unfortunately. If I keep ruminating about all these issues that I'm having, taking these auditions, and, I'm putting extra stress on me. If I don't win this audition, or if I don't advance, or if I don't get to this competition, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, or I'm, messing up my life if I don't do this. All that does is amplify the fear response. It amplifies, it's creating the situation where my mind thinks this is a danger. This audition or this mistake that I made in playing is a danger. It's something that I need to be afraid of. And so making that little bobble in my bow when I was playing this audition triggered that fear response and caused, me to lock up, caused me to hyperventilate and go into that flight and that fear response. However, there's things that can be done. As I stepped back and I started learning about this, I realized I trained myself to fear. I can train myself to manage it as well. And there are a number of different things that you can do to kind of manage and to redirect that fear response. So when that thing happens, the stimulus will always be there, but when it gets to a certain point, instead of having that amygdala fire and that fear response kick in, your higher thinking process, prefrontal cortex and the higher functioning part of the brains can redirect that emotion into productive means to maintain control and to actually improve your performance in a lot of ways. So I had to go basically on a learning journey and find out why did that happen and what can I do to overcome this? And instead of going to these auditions and saying, I need to win this, I need to advance, I need to get to this next level so I can win this job, so I can, provide a living for my family, or, so I can have, progress my next career, part of the career, whatever it is. I sat back and said, okay, win or lose, I redirected my thought pattern to say, this is a learning opportunity. And going into that, it helped change things, because once I took a lot of stress off myself, and it allowed me to step back and figure out, A, what are the things that are triggering this response? B, what are the things that are helping it? And C, how have I been able to grow from this? So some of the primary causes, there are three basic primary causes that cause this fear response. First off is with music performance anxieties, you have a high ego investment. So you think, okay, this is a job or this is a competition that I want to win. So, and if I win this, kudos to me, or it's like, my wife's going to look up to me more, or I'll be able to provide a living for my kids, or anything like that. So you put a lot of pressure on yourself with that. The other one's evaluative threat. One thing that was always weird to me is like not seeing anybody behind the curtain when I took auditions was more fearful for me than actually being able to see the person and play in front of them. So having that curtain up and not seeing anybody, my mind went crazy, and it's like, they're thinking all these things, crazy things about me, and obviously, they heard that, they know that sounds terrible. So that again was another thing. So that evaluated, it's the audience or the judges, the fear of what they're going to think. And the third one is the fear of failure, fearing having to admit to myself, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe this isn't the right career, or, feeling that, I'm going to get up in front of my peers or my friends and just make a fool of myself. And so all these things can add up. And those are the three primary ones that kind of contribute to music performance anxiety. There's technically kind of a fourth one, but it's more of a trait anxiety. So if you come into performing, or you come into as just a normal person into the music career or even a performing career, yet you have a kind of a natural high levels of anxiety, these three things will amplify that and will cause it to magnify and that fear response to fire even more. So what I had to learn how to do is I explored into a bunch of different things. I ended up reading a bunch on cognitive therapy. I was going to counseling. I talked to doctors about, certain medications I could take, beta blockers. I did visualization techniques, I did breathing techniques. I ended up learning about, different therapies, yoga, exercises. So all different types of things in order to try to help me overcome this response and this fear that I was having. And it ultimately breaks down into kind of three subcategories, when we're doing this. So actually, we'll talk about that in a minute, but what I'm going to share with you here is, well, I actually have it up there, the physical, the mental, and the emotional subcategories. Didn't realize I put that there. What I'm going to share with you is just 4 different things that I actually did. I ended up doing many more, but I thought I'd just share with you 4 exercises that I found that immediately helped me in this regard. The first one is called what they call a 4-7-8 breathing exercise. I remember I came to one audition and I was running late, and because I'm a bass player, you have to haul the instrument up, and you're always trying to get it through the doors, and you're carrying your stool and you're carrying the bass and everything else, and it's physically taxing. So I park the car and I'm running in with my bass and the stool into this audition thing, and basically I had like 5 minutes to warm up in the practice, or 5 minutes before I got into the warm-up room and run up, which then I had like 10 minutes before I was on stage. So my heart rate at this time is super high. I'm already anxious because I'm running late, and then I'm physically exhausted from bringing the bass up. I'm sweating and everything. One thing I started doing is what is called 4-7-8 breathing. And what that does is physically allows you through breathing to lower your heart rate and to get yourself into a calmer state of mind. And the way it works is you breathe in slowly for a count of 4 seconds. So 2, 3, 4. You hold your breath then for a count of 7 seconds. 6, 7, and then you breathe out slowly for 8 seconds. And you start the process over again. 4 in, hold it for 7, breathe out slowly for 8. And usually like a controlled breathe out. So that we kind of make that shushing sound, because it allows you to actually control it as you're breathing out. And by doing that, it allowed the heart rate to slow down, allow me to kind of regulate my body. And by the time I got on stage, my heart rate was at a normal normal rate at that moment. So this is one of those exercises that you can do that you have to kind of affects the physical reactions or physical bodies that we have. One of the other things I did that helped almost immediately, and it was surprising how much it helped, is I wrote down all the fears I had about the audition about an hour beforehand. And it was things like, I worry I'm going to mess up, this certain section of the audition. I'm worried about that one shift. I'm worried that I'm going to trip when I'm walking on stage. I'm worried that my bass is going to slide when I sit down. Or I'm worried that I'm not going to get the right type of spiccato. Or I'm worried, and I wrote down all these fears that I had about the audition. And what that did is it allowed my higher thinking, higher cognitive part of my brain to analyze all those fears beforehand and to provide a place for those fears to be filed in my brain in case those fears ever get triggered in the ancient part of the brain. And it's interesting because and that's one of those ways of redirecting the stimulus response of the brain. And there was an interesting experience I had with this. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to perform as a soloist with the Eastman School of Music Orchestra here. And I did the same thing. I'd written down some of the fears I had before the actual performance on stage at the this beautiful Kodak Hall that they have here, almost 3,000 seats. It was Meliora weekend, so we had a whole bunch of alumni in, of course, the whole bass studio and everybody else. And so a lot of pressure on me, I felt. But I used this technique to write down all my fears about a half hour beforehand. And one of my fears was, I'm worried about this one section that I have a tendency to forget. Is this arpeggio section that it seems like whenever I got to it, I would always just kind of forget which arpeggio I was supposed to be playing at that one specific spot. And what it did when I wrote that down made me think, well, if that happens, I know I can catch up like half a measure, maybe even a measure later. I can find my spot at that moment regardless of whatever arpeggio it is, if I don't remember. And so my brain had kind of contemplated what I could do about it. Well, what happened when I got up, I was on performing, and this is from memory, for those bass players, it's the Bottesini Concerto. I got to that arpeggio, and I remember in my mind, it almost like it was coming before me. It's like, and I got to that point, and I couldn't see anything in my mind afterwards. I couldn't see what the next notes were, and I wasn't sure. And I got to that point, and right as I hit it, the path appeared before me. But what happened is, as that fear response started to kick in, I could feel it immediately kind of shift back into my brain saying, you'll handle this, you'll know what to do. So instead of that fear response, something like affecting my heart, affecting my body, which in the past it did, I almost felt it in my mind. It was a weird feeling where I could all of a sudden think my brain had a response, had an answer for that fear response. It said, it'll be okay, you'll get through it even if you forget a few notes. And what happened as soon as I got to that point, the path in my mind opened up beforehand, and I knew what I was supposed to play at that very moment, and it went amazingly well. I was extremely happy with how that went. It's writing down your fears. Another one, meditation and physical health. We can't really stress the importance of how to be physically able to perform your pieces. A lot of us get tendonitis, carpal tunnel. If you're not performing it properly or in a proper technique, you can cause injuries in your back, in your body, in your fingers, in your breathing, in your throat if you're a singer. So a lot of that's extremely important. So I ended up doing yoga. I ended up doing a number of different exercises to make sure, and becoming very aware of how I'm sitting, how I'm standing, and always being aware as I'm performing if I'm getting tight or not. And one thing I can find out, I can realize is as I'm performing, I can begin to just be aware of my body and realize certain things are getting tight. Maybe I'll breathe a little bit more to kind of relax this out. Another part of the thing is meditation, which when I think meditation, I do a lot of visualization techniques. I visualize beforehand the whole piece that I'm playing or the whole audition. I visualize where the audition is going to be. I visualize myself walking out on stage with my instrument. In order to do this, I will get pictures of the hall. I'll get pictures of the location where I'm at. And I'll have an idea of what it looked like. And this actually was a very interesting experience I had. I took an audition with the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I'd never been to Philly before. I'd never been to their hall. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what to expect. But Google's an amazing thing where you can find all types of pictures of everything. So I got pictures of the hall. I got on Street View. I knew where I was going to park. I knew how to get there. I knew the door I was going to go in, what the door looked like. I knew what the backstage looked like. And then most importantly, I knew what the stage looked like, both from the audience and from the stage looking out at the audience. And it was amazing to me because when I went out and I walked out on stage and I sat down and I looked around, I could feel, I've been here before. I know what this is. Because in my mind, I visualized myself sitting on that stage, looking out and playing my audition multiple times. And it allowed my mind, my body to prepare myself for that actual experience of walking out on stage, sitting down and being there. as if I'd actually been there before. And one of the last ones is beta blockers. Now, when I was going through college, beta blockers was like, kind of like, let's not really talk about that. And it was also one of those things where it's like, well, some people use it, some people don't. Or he's like, yeah, even I remember asking one of my teachers about it, and he said, well, I've never used those, and maybe you can talk to someone about this other person about it. And so at that time, nobody really talked about it, and there was kind of this, even though they didn't really say it, this feeling is like, well, if you don't have it, you don't have the ability to do it, perform at this level, then maybe you should figure something else out with your life. And so people will use beta blockers, but it's always kind of a shame about like taking them. It's like, well, no one's willing to admit that, yes, I'm taking these beta blockers. What's interesting is this has been well known in the medical community to help with performance anxiety. And for decades now, they've basically known, they've done studies that it helps with performance anxiety. But there's an interesting thing. It doesn't help with the fear. It helps with the somatic response, which is your physical body. So beta blockers specifically kind of keep the heart rate lower. So when I got on stage and I started performing again, my heart rate, if I started getting a little nervous, my heart rate wouldn't suddenly shoot through the roof. What it does, it can come up and it'll come down, but it doesn't, immediately spike. And for me, that helped take a little bit of the edge off of the whole anxiety part. And it allowed me to feel more confident. Just that, okay, I've done all this other stuff that's improved my confidence. I can also, rely upon my body reacting the way I want it to react to. Now, with beta blockers, obviously, it's a medication. You want to speak with your doctor. Yes, for most part, it's extremely safe, but there's a couple underlying factors that, again, you always want us to talk with your doctor. I don't suggest self-medicating or using any other type of drug or alcohol or anything to self-medicate, which some people do. And so ultimately you want to find ways that are going to be healthy for you physically and mentally to manage this anxiety. So at this point, I want to actually turn it over to my wife, who, as Galen points out, has done a lot of work on a lot of the different options that are available both in the medical community as well as in larger modalities of being able to find out what's available. And I think part of this came from her concern for me, just as a wife, worried about me. And I'm so incredibly thankful. She's been an amazing support in that regard. So what I'm going to do in this part of the presentation is she'll come up and continue on with what some of the options you can have.
Hi, it is my pleasure to be here tonight to be able to share my experience as a wife of a professional musician for almost 15 years, and as a nurse. My daughter calls me the nurse-sician, the nurse musician. I do not play an instrument, but I am very happy that I have been able to share this journey with my husband. I have been a nurse for about 15 years. And about 5 of those years were focused on taking care of surgical patients, and about 10 have been focused on quality management. And the last 2 years of my career, I have been working for the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Rochester Medical Center. Well, I finished my master's in medical management, and I had an opportunity to pick a capstone project to work on. And what I decided to do was to develop peak performance strategies for the Eastman School of Music. And how this came about is that I had a very personal experience when my husband presented his lecture recital. Since I have been going with him through this journey together, it felt so personal when he was relating his story about performance anxiety. And I just was there, and I was getting emotional because I'm feeling it's like I'm hearing our life story. And that touched me deeply. And then it gave me the opportunity to give musicians a voice and to be able to use him as a consultant for me to work with a team of professional clinicians, pharmacists, psychiatric nurse, data analyst for the CDC through the university, and a researcher. So my teammates and I were able to give a voice to musicians and to explore what options are available. So I'm here to speak to you as a clinician and also as a family member of someone that has had performance anxiety. So the first thing I want to point out that's available through the university is the You Are Connected network. And what that is a peer coach network. So students can feel that they can find someone to connect them to services through something that is more at their level, a peer. So luckily, the university has a coach that is someone that has experience with music and the mind. And so also, we have here available the Eastman Performing Arts Medicine Network. And what it does is a link for the students to the medical community. And so we also have a counseling center. The University Counseling Center is available to provide students about 12 visits that are covered for them to be able to vent out any worries or concerns and utilize the specialty of professional psychologists to navigate any journey of anxiety they may have or anything that impairs their performance. We also have a musician performance anxiety therapy group. It is currently on hold here at the Eastman School of Music due to the pandemic, but it is something that has been provided on a weekly basis. And this is certainly an opportunity for the students to learn techniques and strategies to manage their performance anxiety. I have spoken to the therapist that has run this group, and it was fascinating to learn that students have an opportunity to go through different scenarios to be able to learn the techniques to manage anxiety or to attain a level of flow to pick up their performance. And the last thing that I would like to talk about is University Health Service primary care. Part of the services available to the students that are full-time at the school is not only to have the 12 visits through the University Counseling Center, but also to have primary care. And we are very fortunate to have Dr. Ralph Manchester, who is the past president of the Performing Arts Medicine Medical Association and has a very strong background treating musicians' ailments for over 30 years. And so that is an opportunity for musicians to be seen, to be able to be evaluated, and if they have isolated musician performance anxiety, they may be eligible to get a prescription for a beta blocker, because in the student community, students need to be mindful that beta blockers are a medication that need to be monitored by a physician. There might be a tendency to want to share with peers, but it is very important to consider that there is a need for medical supervision because it affects the heart. Also, beta blockers could be contraindicated for singers as it could increase salivation and other musicians. So it is really important to be able to get on the right treatment. Another thing that it is helpful to know is that if you see the primary care doctor, either Dr. Manchester or another physician that is available on a weekly basis to see students, you are able to get a physical therapy referral. Physical therapy here at the Eastman School of Music is covered through insurance, and you cannot see the physical therapist unless you have a referral from the primary care doctor. And why would you consider this for peak performance or for musician performance anxiety? Because there is a somatic response. Sometimes the first symptom is going to manifest physically, and if you talk to the physical therapist here at the school, Sue Callan Harris, she is able to determine whether the physical response is related to performance anxiety. In addition, I would like to discuss some options that are available. And what they are is, first, I would like to talk about Alexander technique. Alexander technique really helps with body awareness. It helps to reshift the mind and focus it. So it is available here at the school. There are 2 different classes, one for undergrad and one for graduate students. One runs in the spring, the other one runs in the fall. Also, it is important to note that the Alexander technique teacher, Katie Fittipaldi, has a studio available in the community that can be accessed via self-pay. We also have a sports psychology program through the fitness center at the University of Rochester Medical Center. And the beauty of that is musicians are a small muscle athletes. So when you think about an athlete, well, that's what it is, a small muscle repetition. So a sports psychology has a performance psychology aspect that can help musicians. So we have on the staff Dr. Craig Cipher. Dr. Cipher actually accepts insurance, and the insurance that the students have here at the school can cover therapy sessions that are geared to treat any psychiatric condition that affects performance. It is not going to cover a student that wants to learn peak performance strategies without having a diagnosis. For that, there is a self-pay option, but it is going to cover a student seeking therapy to treat a depression that does not allow the proper practice habit, or because of the lack of motivation, because of the exhaustion. It's going to help the student that has trait anxiety and is not able to perform at their highest level. It's going to help this student that has attention deficit disorder and has inability to focus to be able to produce the result the student needs. And there's a plethora of other conditions that can be impairing performance that are psychiatric in nature that could be managed by Dr. Cipher, because he's actually not only a psychologist, but a coach. He's a certified peak performance coach. Besides that, I want to point out that the Eastman School of Music has a wellness curriculum, and these offer many different classes that are geared towards exploring different wellness topics. Alexander technique being one of them. There's a yoga and meditation class as well. There are strategies for audition success courses, not only for musicians, but also there's another course geared towards singers as well. And there are body and the mind classes available, and not through the Eastman School of Music, but through the University of Rochester. You can also access a mindfulness course taught by Dr. Gifrida, which is excellent. We also have available, like I talked about, the ability to get medications prescribed through the UHS primary care and mindfulness. Now, there's something very interesting happening at the university. When we think about the Eastman School of Music, we usually only think about this as school, but we gotta realize and recognize that the Eastman School of Music is part of a big umbrella, which is the University of Rochester. Through the University of Rochester, there is a Quorum Mindfulness Project. There's a meditation project that is university-wide. This project allows students to be able to do a course to learn how to meditate, but it also allows students to drop in and do Zoom yoga sessions or meditation sessions. And so there's also a different program that engages the students in leading their own meditations. So lastly, I want to talk about biofeedback. Here at the Eastman School of Music, there are 2 treatment modalities that use biofeedback. One of them is physical therapy, and the other one is Alexander technique. When I'm talking about biofeedback, I'm referring to a treatment modality that allows you to control your physical response. For example, Justin was saying that when he breathes, he's able to lower his heart rate. Similarly, there are certain things that can be done during physical therapy and Alexander technique to be able to utilize biofeedback and affect the body response. Lastly, I want to talk about a little bit about my personal experience. Not as an operational business person or as a quality nurse interested in psychiatry and the mental health and well-being of the students, but now I'm gonna wear my wife hat. And I would like to talk about this because I didn't know how to be a musician's wife at all. So I'm gonna tell you the first mistake I made. I sold my husband stools and keyboard at the garage sale. And my husband was kind of surprised, and I didn't understand. He was going through a low moment. They were not being utilized. They were just basically junk, and I just got rid of them. So I totally failed. My second failure was my husband has this huge instrument. So if I think about it, this is how I think about it practically now. Well, if this instrument costs this much, it deserves a room in our house. We did not have a practice room. And this went on for a while. Anyway, I learned my lesson and I was able to get my two children into one room and create a music room for him because I knew he needed practice space. So I really went. It was a journey to get here where I am public speaking at the Eastman School of Music about peak performance strategies and musician performance anxiety. So family support is very important. If your family members don't know what to do, be patient with them. They can get there. Family and friends can be support. They can give you ideas, help you to give you access to services. It's the studio teacher as well. The studio teachers have had tremendous, great relationships with many people here, like with the physical therapist, and they could be the one to tell you where to go. Dr. Manchester, he's a nationwide or world-renowned figure in the field of performing arts medicine and has a heart for students in need of performing arts medicine services. Sue Cullen Harris, a physical therapist, she's also a wellness teacher, and she has also been part of the Performing Arts Medicine Medical Association for a long time. She's one of the most knowledgeable people here at the school about this topic. Galen McCormick, she's not only the manager of the EPAM program, but also the teacher of the class for strategies for audition success. So all of these people here can lead you to where you need to go or what you need to do. We will also be glad to provide our contact information, and it will come out and when the handout gets sent out, and we'll be able to be a resource and even share some other things that are available in that community, like neurofeedback. There's now a pool, salted pool that you can go and use to meditate and get into a flow state and many other things. And now I would like to just turn the time back to Galen for what I imagine will be our Q&A session.
Oh my goodness, thank you both so much. This has really been wonderful. And I really appreciate hearing about your personal journey. I think that relates for a lot of us more than just tables of information and things you can do. I really, really appreciate that. I'm someone who also has struggled a lot with performance anxiety, which is one of the reasons I was really grateful when I was asked to take that class over from a colleague who was retiring. It means a lot to me to help other people with that. So thank you, Justin. And Anne, I just think it's amazing when you shared your experience, you know, being married to a musician. I am also married to a non-musician, which is what we call all of you who don't do music for a living. And yeah, it's really different, isn't it? Yeah, we have our very special needs. So thank you for sharing from that point of view, because, you know, it's important to remember that our network is all around us and we need to approach different people, you know, for different types of support. So I don't have any questions here yet. So I'm wondering if you'd like to lead us in one more example of
Okay.
what we could do. Do you have something short we could do?
Yeah, we do
before we wrap up?
visualization technique.
I would love that.
So one thing that really helped me again, as I was explaining, was visualization. And to kind of emphasize the importance of how visualization really affects the mind, I'm going to run you through a little exercise right now. So everybody online here, if you can close your eyes, and just in front of you, imagine you're sitting at a table, and right in front of you on a plate is the most perfect strawberry you have ever seen. Huge and deeply red with those, pits in it, and it's got the little bit of green on the leaves right there, and it's just beautiful looking. And it's super ripe, it was just picked, it's probably even warm from the sun that was just picked outside. And in your mind, I want you to reach out and pick it up with your hand and just feel, the softness of it. Maybe it's a little squishy in your hand. You feel the divots of the seeds, you can feel the roughness of the leaves. And then take it and bring it to your nose, right in front of your mouth. Maybe just stick it up against your lips in your mind. You feel the softness. Maybe you can smell that tartness a little bit. Now in your mind, take a bite and just think about that juices that you have to kind of dribbling in your mouth. Maybe you have to, slurp it up a little bit so it doesn't dribble down your chin, and just think of that richness as you take that bite and kind of savor and chew it and swallow. Maybe take another bite in your mouth, and just that, the warmth of the sun and the juiciness of that strawberry. And imagine just how wonderful that tastes. Now, if you can open your eyes and think, how many of you are hungry now? How many of you maybe are salivating a little bit, thinking, man, I really want a strawberry right now? Well, that's really what visualization does, is it puts your mind and your body into almost that same physical response. So one thing I did in preparation for the concerto, as well as my solo recitals, is I would put myself in a position where I visualize the entire performance of whatever piece I was playing, especially if I had it memorized. Maybe I was sitting down, maybe I'd sit on a stool, whatever, but I would just sit there and I would go through the entire piece from the moment I would walk on stage, get myself set, warm up, play, or maybe do a little tuning, and then play the piece note by note in real time. So if my piece took 5 minutes, my visualization exercise took 5 minutes. If my piece was 17 or 20 minutes, it took 17 or 20 minutes for me to go through that whole visualization, because I did it in real time. In my mind, I felt myself, the bow, I imagined how the bow felt going across the strings, pulling sforzandos or doing certain slurs. I imagined all the notes, all the passages as they're going through. And all of that helped me realize a number of different things. First, it helped me realize where I was faulty in my memory. As I was going through playing this, I would think, oh crap, what note am I supposed to play next? And so I could realize there were certain spots that I had tendencies to either forget, or that I needed to practice more to really be sure, or study the score more to really be sure I knew what was going on. Second is, it allowed me to imagine what sound I wanted and what feeling I wanted to create certain things. And if I could imagine the sound I was going to create, if I could imagine the emotional or musical arc that I was creating, it made it so much easier when I actually got to that point and was actually performing. I knew I could do it, because in my mind, I knew I could create the sound. I knew I could create that arc. I knew the whole piece. I knew what the feeling would be like walking out on stage. Oftentimes, in this part of my visualization technique, I would imagine the stage, and I would imagine who I knew would be in the audience there. I knew my wife would be there. I knew my kids would be there. I knew, some people from the studio there, studio teacher. I knew other people would be there. So I would imagine them all there. So when I actually was out there performing, I could see them, and it's as if I'd actually done it before. So there's a saying that I like to say, it's competence breeds confidence. The more competent you are in something, the more confident you can become in it. That's why a lot of times we see these great performers that get up and perform, yeah, maybe they've played a Tchaikovsky violin concerto with 25 different orchestras. Well, by the time they've gone to that second or third orchestra and they've done a pretty good job, they know they can do it again. You know, once they get past that first moment or first couple times, you know you can perform it again, and you have a lot more confidence in yourself. It's like, I was able to do it once, I can do it again. And what that visualization does is it allows you to practice that whole performance as perfectly as you can, perfectly as you want to in your mind, to give you a bit of that confidence beforehand. Say, okay, yes, I know I can get through this. I know I can perform this. So I just encourage you that as one of the techniques that you may use is try that visualization technique. Visualize yourself in first person, as if you're looking at your own eyes, playing your instrument, singing whatever it is you happen to be doing, and going through that whole performance in your mind in real time.
One live question here,
Yes.
which is any tips, this is for string players, specifically for bow shaking with slow or delicate playing?
Slow or delicate playing, that's a good one, because part of it is actually getting used to the real feeling of what it is to play. So a lot of that comes with practice of really isolating and slow practice, just getting that feel of the shaking. And then again, it's for when you're performing, there's a combination of factors that you have to realize. I don't think there's any one tip. You're going to have to and for me, I had to visualize myself playing, those slow, beautiful passages and doing it well. I had to make sure before the audition that I had, taken a beta blocker a couple hours before, so that I knew my heart rate wasn't going up. I'd already written down my fears so that my mind say, okay, if I do start shaking, maybe I can take a breath. Maybe I can visualize my body relaxing a little bit as I'm performing. Maybe I can use a little bit more bow. There's other techniques that, as you talk to your teacher, that will help make certain transitions and bowing transitions easier, but it's a combination of things, because, one is you have to know the technique of how to play slowly well, which is very hard to do. And B, you also have to realize how your body is going to respond and how your mind's going to respond in those high stress situations. And if you can combine several of the techniques together, it will allow you, when you get to that point where you're playing that very slow, melodic, beautiful passage in that stress situation, you can rely and trust your body is going to react the way that you want it to react. I hope that answers it.
I think so. I know I see one here in the audience, but I have to respect that we do have to come out of the hall at a time to get ready for the next class. Yes, Anne, I would like you to come up. It's okay, I'm masked, so you can come up. I'm
Okay.
keeping my mask on. I just want to let you all know this fantastic couple has put this together on no sleep because they've just had a baby recently, and I did want to give you this so that we could all share in your joy. It's probably too big, but I want to thank you for putting this presentation together for all of us, despite everything that's going on in your lives, getting that little one going, and for sharing all of this with our audience here and on Zoom. I'm really, really grateful to both of you. Thank you, all of you who joined us here in the hall tonight and who joined us on Zoom. I hope you all have a great holiday and a new year. And on January 12th, Yemi Rodriguez from the fitness science group you talked about, he's going to be here to talk about sports nutrition. He's a former pro baseball player, and now he works in this whole area of sports fitness and development and these kinds of coaching like you all do. So I'm really excited to share his wisdom with everyone next time. So thank you all for joining us again tonight. Take good care and see you in a month.
Thank you so much.